Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video, I'm back talking about SASUKE, where here I'll be reviewing the latest tournament, SASUKE 41, a tournament that I just largely found to be kind of okay by the end of it. I do feel like it's a tournament that definitely didn't have the landmark moments that SASUKE 40 had. While I do think this tournament is probably edited better than that tournament and did have still some interesting results here and there, I do feel like I come out of it just feeling like it's a pretty middle-of-the-road SASUKE tournament for me, but I still want to run through it from beginning to end, talking about my thoughts along the way, to where Ozzy will start off with stage 1, which was mostly the same from previous tournaments. Ozzy just at this point in SASUKE, like, you're not going to get many changes to the overall course, though. You get one new obstacle here, where thankfully they got rid of the double warp wall, as that was entirely pointless, and instead added a new obstacle after the fishbone, but before the dragon glider, that being Twin Diamond? Twin Dia, I believe is what they called it in the broadcast. I believe the text actually reads Twin Diamond, but again, it ends up being an obstacle that is a modification of something that we've seen on Takeshi's Castle, of just essentially being these two massive blocks that are constantly spinning on a motor and you having to navigate through it. I mean, not something that's like entirely unique, though a completely fine obstacle here, one that does do a decent amount of damage here, though also feels like an obstacle that is pretty easily gamed. I feel like it'll end up being like Fishbone, to where once you know the timing of it all, it makes it pretty easy to get through, to where I don't know if this is an obstacle that I really need to see staying on the course for much further, but it will though. So I mean, whatever, where again, it's a fine obstacle. I still think it made for some pretty interesting moments, to where I'm not opposed to it being here. But through that, we also get an increased time limit here of adding 10 seconds to the clock for some reason, to where I don't feel like this was 100% necessary. While some runs did come pretty close still, we got very few timeouts on this season, to where I did feel like the time limit just as a whole was pretty lenient, though even then we still only got 21 clears, which I'm too fair is a lot. But again, for recent SASUKE, I mean, that's kind of around what you would want, so it's not really that egregious. But as for the results, right away we just start off with a comedian off the start where he fails the steps, so that was kind of underwhelming. Only first to then get to Torisawa, who does his typical thing with the weights and everything, but here he ends up having a fun fail. Again, what you would expect from him failing the rolling hill and falling backwards on the dismount, but we then follow that up with Fuwa-chan still being here, which was still weird, as she's still doing the same thing with having Yamada stickers on her, but she ends up being the first person to actually reach the Twin Diamond almost as time runs out, which is kind of sad considering the women here were given an additional 25 seconds, but she ends up failing there, to where we then get two other women following her who fail at the exact same spot, both of which being idols that I believe we've seen in the past. And really just beyond that, I mean, we got a series of pretty unnotable runs. Again, some more Twin Diamond fails. We have a comedian failing Fishbone, though the next more important run ends up coming from the appearance of the SASUKE Circle. I guess these people from universities, where they are these massive SASUKE super fans and do SASUKE trivia, I guess. Like, this was just kind of weird. But the first guy that we see from this group ends up failing the Fishbone, though the second person we see here is Yuta Yamashita, to where he shockingly ends up being the first clear of the day, doing so in him just really dominating the course, again being the first to clear Twin Diamond, him having plenty of time as he clears with 25 seconds on the clock, to where again that was a very impressive run, to where he just in general has a very impressive rookie season here. Following that, we get a massive montage of more women failing relatively early, where amongst that is Karen, who's back and fails the silk slider landing, being I believe the only person to genuinely fail the silk slider in this tournament. But beyond that, again, we get more celebrities, including this idol guy that fails Twin Diamond. We also get this lumberjack that actually clears Twin Diamond, only to fail the jump to the dragon glider, though I will say a lot of these runs at this point really start to have mid cuts to the Fishbone, where again it just felt like them skipping through the more boring obstacles, which again like really makes it seem like even Inui realizes that the rolling hill is just such a boring, slow obstacle at this point, to where I really hope he takes this lesson and changes it at some point down the road, though again he's not going to, is he? This is followed by a pretty big jump in the numbers here from 24 to 33, something that this tournament actually very rarely does, something that I do think is an enhancement of the editing on this season, something that again typically we would see a lot of really quick fast forwards, just a lot of skips throughout the tournament, where this tournament felt like it really minimalized a lot of that. It felt like we saw a good chunk of the competitors in this tournament, where I believe we saw around 80 of the stage 1 runs to some degree, which is again a pretty impressive number here. But again, the next notable run here comes from the SASUKE Koshin, which I know is this trial series that was done of these younger competitors trying to get their way on the show, where we really just rushed through all of them here, with the first one of them doing the best of the bunch and getting to Twin Diamond, though does so pretty low on time and ends up failing the jump anyway, to where we then fast forward the next two, with both of them failing the rolling hill. And then after that, we also fast forward through the trials qualifiers, which is a pretty underwhelming result for them as well, to where two of them failed the Twin Diamond, the other fails the Dragon Glider. Again, not a particularly great result for all these people that qualified through trials on this season. After getting another pointless comedian guy, we then finally get to another really notable run here, this one coming from Kaio Nagano, Makoto Nagano's 14-year-old son, who also competed in the last tournament and failed rolling hill. However, this time we see him getting a pretty massive focus here, and us getting our first intro package of the tournament. Again, strange that it didn't happen until number 41 here, which I will say, as much as I'm happy with most of the production value of this tournament and the fact that, again, we got a couple new obstacles, we saw a lot of usage of drones, which led to these cool shots throughout the tournament, I will say the intro packages on this tournament, particularly the interviews in particular, looked really terrible. Toward the green screening during them looked absolutely abysmal and kind of embarrassing for a show like SASUKE. But again, Kaio ends up doing pretty well here. Again, clearing the rolling hill this time, getting to the wall with about 10 seconds left on the clock, and actually getting on his first attempt and clearing with 3 seconds on the clock, to which we have Nagano's theme play as he does so, and all this was a really great moment. And being the youngest clearer in SASUKE history at 14, again, being this nice passing of the torch moment here, to where, again, I would not be shocked if Kaio does become a pretty big mainstay on the show moving forward. And again, it would feel really satisfying if he is part of this next generation for SASUKE, where just in general, I will say also with this tournament, that is something I do think this tournament did excel at, where I do think the appearance of fresh faces that end up doing very well in this tournament did make me feel a bit more confident about the future of SASUKE, which had been very stagnant recently, and a lot of the better competitors being these same old people that we've seen for years, to where now that we're finally getting some newer people finally doing well, I think it leads to some hope for SASUKE down the road. But following Kaio, we then get the other really promising youngster in this grouping, that being Yuta Nakashima, the 15-year-old Black Tiger, who timed out at the warp wall in the previous tournament, yet here he has a really clean run, clearing with almost 20 seconds on the clock, in a spot where, again, he would have been the youngest to ever clear if Kaio didn't just do so. For all this is a pretty strong run there. We then cut to the next Black Tiger, that being Hayato Takasuka, the guy that cleared stage 1 in the previous tournament, failed the spider walk, and here he shockingly ends up failing rolling hill, to which we get a lot of focus on him being very clearly disappointed, just standing in silence in the water before getting out, to where, and I did kind of feel bad for him, especially considering, again, who knows if Yamada's going to give him another shot down the road, but again, a pretty shocking fail there. But then we cut to Kajihara, who's back and obviously just dominates stage 1 and does so with 45 seconds on the clock, being a new speed record for stage 1, breaking David Campbell's record, which was really insane to see there. But then we followed up with seeing Wasabi, a drummer for some band, again, some celebrity guy that had participated in a couple tournaments in the past, though never did particularly well. Though here we get a lot of focus on him, seeing him train with Hyoki and Iwamoto, and showing him constantly training on the Dragon Glider, and shockingly, he clears here. Where I was really not expecting much to come from Wasabi. Again, I felt like he was someone that just felt like this type of competitor that would always fail around the time the Dragon Glider or maybe the wall. But again, no, he actually does pretty well here in this tournament, which I thought was pretty surprising to me. But following this, we do get, again, some rush through runs from some celebrities. Again, not really the traditional fast forwards, where, again, there weren't really many of them on this season. We just got a lot of mid cuts. But again, none of these runs were particularly interesting until we get to Rine Sugeta, who obviously has had some pretty decent runs in the past. And this ends up leading to us seeing him train for a Dragon Glider, which he failed in the previous tournament, and also see him train for a Swing Edge, which, again, I was thinking, oh, is that foreshadowing that he's actually going to get there? But no, he fails the pathway after the silk slider, which was a pretty insane fail here. Again, feeling like a very Shingo moment here of him literally just falling off the path to the next obstacle. To be honest, probably one of the most shocking fails of the entire tournament, and this being one where it really just came out of left field. But we then follow that up with the reappearance of Masashi Hyoki, who, again, is what you would expect here, though he does get a pretty big personal segment here about having broken his foot and still recovering from that. And we do have him having a little bit of a sloppy run here, again, jumping a bit early early on Twin Diamond, and really taking his time on tackle, though he does end up clearing here despite that. But following that, we get another really promising newcomer here in Shuzu Ichimiya, a person that I knew was kind of hyped up coming in this tournament as someone that has a massive course. I believe is the person that owns the course that like King Kasugi and Ryomatachi trained on, to where I thought he was a very promising person here, and he does end up clearing here, mind you, one of the slower times of the tournament, but still ends up clearing with 2 seconds on the clock, so that was cool to see. Now finally we get a couple more unnotable Twin Diamond and Fishbone runs until we do get to another newcomer, that being Ryosuke Miyaoka, who is supposedly this person that has like been auditioning for years and was like a tester in previous tournaments, but he also ends up really dominating here, clearing pretty easily here at 21 seconds on the clock, with him probably being the main standout from this season of this newcomer that definitely feels like he has a lot of potential for down the road. But now we finally get to our first like true traditional fast forward of the tournament, which is used to fast forward a couple clears, with Yusuke Goto getting skipped over here alongside Shinsuke Nagasaki, who actually ends up clearing with only 0.6 seconds on the clock after failing his first attempt. But again, nice to see Shinsuke clear again, even though it doesn't really lead to much. But that's followed up by probably the slowest point in the tournament for me, where this is a point where up until we get towards the higher numbers of the tournament, we really end up focusing a lot on celebrities here, which again is kind of dragging out for me. We see Takahiro Hamada, this idol guy from West, who really gets a lot of focus here, despite the fact that his run was largely mediocre and him just taking so much time on the course. So he ends up timing out at the time that he gets to the Dragon Glider, which was kind of lame, and he ends up trying the obstacle out anyway and ends up failing it anyway. So again, none of that really mattered. We then get the reappearance of the comedy duo that has the guy dressing up as Akiyama every time, and again, we get the same gag here of them just wanting to clear the obstacles that they failed previously, to where instead they end up just failing those same obstacles again. We then get a lot of focus on Ano, this singer who I guess is a big name. We get a lot of focus on her, like having trained with Ayano on the Fishbone. And again, she clears the Fishbone. At least there's that. But she also times out as she does so. So again, another kind of lackluster run. Yeah, we get a couple more idol guys, with Fuma in particular getting a lot of focus here, though he ends up failing the Dragon Glider. But again, the next big run takes us to Roichi Sukada, the ABCZ guy, who really he ends up having kind of a sloppy run here and barely getting through Fishbone, and then wasting a lot of time on Twin Diamond, only to then fail the jump. But straight up Twin Diamond feeling like the celebrity killer on this season, where it felt like a lot of this season's main celebrities ended up failing there, which felt like something that maybe backfired on Inui in that instance. But we then get to this real murderer's row in the high 70s, which again felt very intentional. This happened last tournament as well, where we get the likes of Jun Sato, Tomohiro Muto, Yusuke Suzuki, Naoki Araki, and Kentaro Yamamoto all being clumped together. These really strong competitors that are all very likely to clear, that feel like they're clumped together so that they can just be fast forwarded all in a row as they were in the previous tournament. Yet this time they're portrayed a little bit differently than that. Jun Sato's run is actually shown in full, which is mind-blowing. But a lot of that seems to come from the fact that he's doing these really ridiculous parkour moves along the way, which was pretty fun. Him doing spins while getting through the steps. He does these like bunny hops as he gets through the Fishbone. He does a spin on the warp wall. Again, like all very flashy there, to where he ends up clearing still 31 seconds on the clock. After that, we then get our actual fast forward in Muto, which again, it's getting to the point where it's getting kind of ridiculous for Muto, and the fact that he just feels like this proverbial guy just to be skipped over. And what's funny is that, again, I think they would have fully skipped over this entire block here had it not been for the fact that Suzuki actually ends up failing here, with Suzuki feeling like a bit of a combo breaker in this instance, where he ends up failing the Dragon Glider, surprisingly failing the second railing in particular, which again was kind of just a random spot for him to fail. All while we then follow it up by us seeing Araki and Kentaro Yamamoto pretty easy clear in their runs, taking us to the next of our celebrities, that being obviously the Golden Bomber members, starting off with Kan Yutaka, who obviously gets a big segment as you would expect, though I will say straight up, I actually thought there was a chance that he would actually clear, as I do feel like he's someone that, while very inconsistent, again, he did come very close to clearing him one of the previous tournaments, to where his run here actually felt pretty solid. solid. And he had a decent amount of time, though ends up failing the jump to the Dragon Glider, which felt kind of random. With that, we then get to one of the bigger runs of stage 1, the return of Kenji Darvish, who had missed out on the previous tournaments. And even here, he had a injured Achilles, to where clearly his injury here was going to play a major factor. And we do see him going pretty slow through the course, I would assume due to his injury, to where by the time of getting to the Dragon Glider, he only has 40 seconds left, making it very unlikely that he's going to clear, but still ends up really pushing all the way to the warp wall, where he only has 5 seconds at the time he gets to the warp wall, and does end up grabbing it with one hand, ends up timing out anyway, which again, not shocking considering his injury, though we really do get this emotional exit for him here, and him clearly having re-injured his leg even further, and we do see him being on crutches for the rest of the tournament, which is kind of just a sorrow way to see him go out here. But with that, we then follow it up by really the last chance for the women on this tournament, that being the appearance of Ayano, who obviously cleared last time. And to be honest, like, I thought she would do it again. It seemed like she was having a pretty decent run, and she pretty easily gets to the diamond, and while she does struggle with the second diamond in particular, she still ends up clearing it, only for her to then fail the Dragon Glider transition, with her letting go just way too late there, which was definitely underwhelming to see, as again, going from a tournament that had 3 women clearing stage 1 to one that has 0 was underwhelming, as again, we do get the last few women going immediately following her, though all of them fail relatively early. Now finally, we get a couple more celebrities that have pretty unnotable runs, until we didn't get to Iwamoto, obviously Snowman, who obviously gets the big segment you would expect, obviously being probably the biggest celebrity on the show at this point, and one that is obviously taking the show very seriously. And again, it's cool to see, though obviously he just ends up failing the twin diamond, which again, it's really funny that we get to the point where following stage 1, the biggest celebrity left on the board is Wasabi, and we follow that up with another celebrity in Takeru, who also ends up failing the diamond as well, where it really feels like a lot of these bigger celebrities end up failing there. But then we get to the big names, to where we start out all off with Ryo Matachi, who is there with Kane Kasugi at the sidelines, where sadly Kane had to drop out of this tournament due to an injury, which again really sucked to see, considering it did seem like he was training pretty hard for it, and considering the minimal changes to the course here, I think it's very likely he could have possibly even made the stage 3. But anyway, we have Ryo wanting redemption for failing on Rolling Hill, to where he then proceeds to do the exact same thing he did last time, but just clears it this time, which is the frustrating thing about Ryo, is that it feels like he just never learns from any of his mistakes. It just feels like he does the same thing, he just hopes it works, and to be fair, it worked out for him this time. Again, he clears Rolling Hill, he clears the fishbone despite doing it very sloppily, and does clear the course with 11 seconds on the clock. But still, it's like, considering what we later see from Ryo, I don't understand why he hasn't learned to just not rush things in the way he does, which, I'm to be fair, there was definitely a point back in the day where he would just take things too slow, and that would cause him to fail, but I think he's kind of overcorrected in that way that makes him even sloppier. And speaking of sloppy, we then get to Tomohiro Kawaguchi, who is another one that I was actually expecting to clear here. I mean, he did clear in the previous tournament. Again, nothing really seemed to be stopping him here, though he shockingly ends up failing the jump to the Dragon Glider somehow. Again, missing with one of his hands. Like, again, definitely a really underwhelming way to see his season go out there. But then we get to the internationals, to where, despite surprisingly getting very little focus up to this point, we then get the appearance of Daniel Gill, who I was pretty excited to see here. I mean, Daniel Gill, not my favorite A&W competitor in the world. He's definitely someone that I was very interested in seeing attempt Sasuke here, and to be fair, it plays out pretty much as you would kind of expect it to. Though I will say, it did feel very strange how little focus he got here, to where, considering the highlight that the likes of getting Drew, but also Jesse Graff ended up getting in their runs, again, you would think that Daniel Gill would get that same treatment, but he didn't, where we don't even see a full run from him the entire tournament, but we do start off with him at the fishbone, where he really ends up mistiming it there, though ends up getting through it anyway, and is actually kind of low on time, ends up still clearing here at 6 seconds on the clock. And we follow that up with the return of Renee Castley, who, as we saw, made it to the final stage in Sasuke 37, and it was kind of shocking that he hadn't been back since then. Obviously, there were a mix of like COVID reasons and just other scheduling issues, but again, cool to see him finally back here, to where he gets more of the focus that you would expect the internationals to get, probably taking away Daniel's spotlight to a degree, and him really just dominating stage 1 here, and having a very quick run here, clearing a 43 seconds on the clock, again being a couple seconds off of Kajihara's new record, but still a very impressive run there. Well, we then wrap it up with obviously the bigger names of the All-Stars all in a row, starting off with Shingo Yamamoto, who again had a really great run in Sasuke 40. You would think maybe there's a chance he repeats that, until till we see him fail the rolling hill, because obviously, I feel like the most Shingo way to go out here after having a really breakout tournament the previous time. But then we follow that up with Yamada's run, where he gets so much focus in this tournament of him getting really emotional on the starting line and talking about how his mom passed away. And it felt very strange that the show was like really hyping up Yamada as if he could clear when clearly he can't, but he actually surprisingly does the best of the all-stars here, which again, if you were to tell me that there was a world where in Sasuke 41 Yamada would perform better than the likes of Shingo and Nagano, again, that would blow my mind. But he actually makes the Twin Diamonds only to fail there, taking us to Nagano's run, where straight up, I kind of already had like a sense that he would fail early. Like I was already preparing myself for him like maybe failing Rolling Hill or even like Twin Diamond, but he doesn't even make it that far. He literally just falls on the first step of the quad steps, which is mind-blowing to see. Really insane to see Nagano, again, obviously one of the best Sasuke competitors of all time, probably doing the worst of literally anybody on this tournament. Now, supposedly what happened is that the spray he put on his foot got stuck to the fabric on the steps, and that caused him to trip there, though really ends up being an insane fail from Nagano there. But again, we wrap it up with the typical subjects here of us seeing Urushihara return, and him, again, staying pretty consistent here. Again, kind of insane that we're in this spot where Urushihara is one of the most consistent competitors on the board, but he ends up clearing with 8.9 seconds. And we have all the finalists from the previous tournament all in a row. But again, Tada clears with 12 seconds, Yamamoto clears with 35 seconds, only for us to then see the full run of Yusuke Morimoto, which again, straight up at this point, I was thinking, okay, maybe Yusuke's gonna win, considering we get a pretty lengthy segment for him here. And again, he does obviously clear 12 seconds on the clock, but again, the rest of the tournament doesn't play out nearly as expected. But again, we get 21 stage 1 clears. Again, a reasonable number here. Now, again, considering a new obstacle on the course, you're maybe expected to be a bit lower, but still, I think a decent number for what we see down the road. And it could have been even more interesting if we got a good stage 2, but again, we got the stage 2 and it's just the same. Literally same time limit, same course. What you would expect. I kind of get it to a degree in the fact that obviously they need to make these modifications to stage 3 in particular to stop Morimoto. But still, again, like stage 2 has just become such a slog. And unsurprisingly, during this tournament, we see the record be broken for most stage 2 clears because it's a boring, relatively easy stage 2. But again, we do get some pretty good performances from some new names here. Again, we started off with obviously Yuta Yamashita, who has a really smooth run here, clearing with 11 seconds on the clock. Again, feeling like a very impressive rookie there. Though we follow that up with the two youngsters, starting it off with Kayu Nagano, who ends up failing on the rolling log, which is, to be fair, kind of what I was expecting coming into this, where I didn't really expect him to do particularly well in stage 2. But again, still, I think like him clearing stage 1 here was enough to really make him feel like one of these like potential new stars for down the road. And then we followed up with Yuka Nakashima, again, the 15-year-old, where he ends up almost also failing on the rolling log, though ends up saving it and really ends up dominating a lot of the rest of the course until the backstream, where he ends up struggling there and times out, which again was a disappointing end to his run considering how strong his first half of the run had been. But I feel like he's again another person that I'm expecting to see do very well down the road. Now following that, we get a fast forward of Kajihara's run with him clearing 22 seconds on the clock, which again was expected, only for us to then get the full run of Wasabi, who again, I was 100% expecting him to fail relatively early on in stage 2. Again, probably feeling the salmon ladder, and if not, again, probably timing out, but somehow he clears. Again, mind-blowing to see Wasabi make it to stage 3. So again, that was insane to me. But then we also get the appearance of Hyoki, who again gets a lot of focus on him failing backstream last time, though obviously he clears it this time and clears pretty easily. And following that, we get a few fast forwards. First up coming from Uchimiya, who ends up timing out the wall lift, which I think was a kind of a disappointing end to his run, considering again, he is someone that had practiced so much on Sasuke obstacles to where I feel like it could have been very interesting to see how he took on stage 3, but again, he doesn't make it there. And then we also fast forward through Miyaoka's run, where he ends up clearing pretty easily, to where then we then cut to Yusuke Goto getting his run shown in full, which is not a good sign for Yusuke Goto, as again, it feels like Yusuke Goto is someone that they just like to skip over unless he does something notable, to where again, him clearing here probably would not have been notable. So I thought it was pretty clear he's going to fail, and what do you know, he fills the rolling log. Who would have guessed? And then we follow that with a bit of a strange moment here in Shunsuke Nagasaki being shown to clearly be limping, where he then has the withdrawal due to injury 3, which again was disappointing to see that being the way his run ended. As again, it would have been cool to see him back in stage 3, though again, who knows what happened. Following that, again, we get the typical fast forward, as I mentioned, from that real murderer's row of Jun Sato getting most of his run fast forwarded, though we do have to see him on the spider drop to where he doesn't even use the bottom panel, which I will say straight up, I'm shocked that's not considered a DQ, but again, he ends up clearing easily. Muto then clears, followed by Araki, and then Yamamoto, taking us to our full run from Ryo Matachi, which, once again, not a great sign for Ryo Matachi. And what do you know? He does the exact same thing he did in Sasuke 38, just rushing into the salmon ladder and ends up missing a whole bunch of rungs, ends up failing towards the top, which, again, all that sound about right. And him just simply not learning from his mistakes, but whatever. Following that, we get more fast forwards from the internationals, both Daniel Gill and Renee Cassidy clearing, taking us to Yuji Urushihara, to where, again, I was shocked that we actually saw his run in full. Again, I was actually expecting at this point that would just rush through the rest of the runs, maybe see Morimoto's, but no, we actually stopped down to see Urushihara's, to where, again, it's not even that notable of a run here, and he ends up clearing pretty easily with 2.3 seconds left, which, to be fair, is relatively low, but still, I mean, like, it's not that notable of a run, so I was kind of shocked that we saw it here. And to be honest, it kind of made me think, okay, maybe there's a shot of, like, Urushihara being last man standing because of this, but no, that didn't really happen. And what do you know, we just fast forward through the rest of the finalists, and Tada clearing with 18 seconds, Yoshiyuki clearing with the fastest time of the night at 26 seconds, and Morimoto getting fast forwarded as well, clearing with 14 seconds, which is, again, not a great sign for Kanzen Seiha. But with that, again, we get a record-breaking 15 clears on stage 2. Again, many of them being skipped over. Mind you, not as many as in Sasuke 40, where that one it felt like they really just skipped over all the clears there. Here we at least got to see some of them in full, but again, I probably didn't need to. The reason why we probably saw that is because we had no final stage, which straight was something I was definitely thinking about at this point. I do feel like at this point, like knowing how much time was left in the tournament and the fact that they actually went out of their way to show stage 2 clears despite the runtime of stage 1 being on par with Sasuke 40s, again, it definitely did scream out to me as, oh, we're probably not getting a final stage, which takes us to stage 3, and we get to see why, where we see a new obstacle here, that being a modification to the vertical limit, that being the vertical limit burst, which I will say I really like that name. But again, it's a version of the vertical limit that kind of mixes in this aspect of like something like the nail clippers from A&W, where the first and final ledges are on this like axis to where you have to grab another vertical limit that swings down when you do so. And again, it's a really cool modification to the vertical limit here, where I've talked about for a while now that I've been wanting a modification to the vertical limit, where again, my idea was to make it somewhat similar to like the cliffhanger Kai, though again, I think this modification is pretty much a better version of that. I thought this was pretty cool to see, and to be fair, it did seem like a bit probably too difficult for this tournament in particular, where it felt very clear this was going to be the end point for the tournament, but still pretty cool to see this new twist to the obstacle here. And we do get this great moment of us seeing the competitors see the reactions to the tester doing it, with the tester even failing at the end, again making it even more clear how this obstacle is probably not getting finished in this tournament. Though along with that, we also get another minor modification to the course, that being that the Sidewinder landing platform had been modified to where we did see Issa in the last tournament kind of just luck his way into landing on it, where you could definitely tell that's probably a major motivation here in them making the landing platform smaller to where you can't really do that anymore. But again, something that didn't really seem to play a factor here. But again, we do start off the runs with Yuta Yamashita having a pretty clean run up to the cliffhanger, though he ends up failing the second transition there, which ends up being the real ninja killer of this tournament, to where most people don't even get through the cliffhanger, which is to be expected, though it even felt like some people that I was expecting to clear it did end up failing there, where we then cut to Kajihara, who I was actually expecting to clear it. I mean, like, he's someone that's failed the cliffhanger in the last 2 tournaments, though I was expecting him to have very much trained on it. For again, I was thinking he'd be the first to fail the vertical limit, though he doesn't even make it there, with him also failing the second transition. We then get to Wasabi, who again, I was straight up thinking he was probably going to fail Sidewinder, and if not, then Swing Edge, though he somehow makes it to the cliffhanger, only for him to then fail the first transition. But again, like, pretty good run for Wasabi there, where again, I'm shocked he made it as far as he did. Again, made it further than even Darvish has ever done. So again, good on him there. We then get to Hiyoki's run, where, I mean, this one goes as expected in him failing the cliffhanger, though the path there was a bit rocky in the fact that he barely gets the second Sidewinder jump, to where he almost slips off at the end there. And through that ends up really seeming to sap his strength from that point on, though he does shockingly clear Swing Edge despite being completely sapped by that point. But again, ends up failing the cliffhanger as expected. But then we get to Ryosuke Miyaoka, who actually gets his intro package here, which is weird weird considering we literally just cut to him on the cliffhanger. But again, it definitely gave me the sense that, okay, he's definitely going to be the first to clear the cliffhanger. And what do you know? He does. Him being the first to attempt the vertical limit burst, and he actually makes the first transition here and actually has a pretty solid attempt at the obstacle, only to fail the very last transition, which definitely feels like the toughest part of the obstacle. Where again, the first transition and the last transition seem to be exactly the same, but obviously for you to do last transition after being gassed out from doing the rest of the obstacle, it does feel very brutal. And we do see Miyaoka fail there, though technically at the end of the day ends up being tied for first place on this tournament through that, which again is a very impressive performance from him, to where again I would hope that he becomes a major mainstay moving forward. But finally, that we then get the typical fast forwards from Jun Sato shockingly failing the cliffhanger again. Who would have expected? Well, then also seeing Muto being fast forwarded with him shockingly getting to the cliffhanger this time after failing Sidewinder twice now, but he ends up failing the first transition there. We then shockingly get the actual full run of Araki, to where, again, not a good sign that we're getting the full run of Araki, but he ends up failing the jump to the third Sidewinder, being the only person to even fail the Sidewinder in this tournament, which is a pretty shocking fail considering he's never failed it before. But following that, we then get to Kitaru Yamamoto, with us even getting an intro pack from him, where at this point, I mean, it was pretty much down to him and Morimoto for me as the people that could potentially clear the vertical limit. And here we do have seeing him clearing the cliffhanger in a pretty interesting way, as he really had just terrible timing on it, which straight up, I do feel like a lot of people were struggling with the timing on the cliffhanger, to where it has felt like in the past that there was like this set pattern with the cliffhanger dimension to where you could time it at least somewhat well. However, on this tournament, it felt like just no one was able to really do so, which is a level of randomness here that I would obviously prefer not to have, but clear the obstacle despite that is pretty impressive. And we do see him clear there, only for him to then also struggle by the end of the vertical limit and ends up failing at the same final transition, which at this point again made it very clear to me that Yusuke was also probably going to fail there as well. But again, then we get to the internationals, starting off with Daniel Gill, who probably has one of the worst cliffhanger dimension performances I've seen in terms of timing, to where he was just completely off, to where we literally just see him hanging there waiting for the ledge to get closer, though he ends up failing the second transition, which again isn't that shocking to me. I do feel like this is where most A&W competitors will end up failing if they were on Sasuke, is the cliffhanger dimension or vertical limit combo, where really I feel like most A&W competitors should be able to get to this point on Sasuke, but I feel like this is the real murderer's row for them, with a lot of them just simply not being able to actually get through it. But then we follow that up with Renee Castley, who again has cleared stage 3 in the past, though to be fair I had no real faith in him doing so this time, where again we had some new obstacles since the last time he went on, and also the cliffhanger dimension is actually working this time, as last time he cleared the cliffhanger it was without its motors on due to the rain, and even then since then he's shown a perpetuity for failing the cliffhanger on his original show, and what do you know, he fails the cliffhanger here. Not that shocking to me. But then we get to Urushihara. Sure, again I thought at a point there was a shot of him being last man standing. We do even see him like training on the vertical limits, where he has a pretty easy run to the cliffhanger, though shockingly does even make it to the vertical limit with him failing the second transition, again seeming to just have like really bad timing there. But again, seeing Urushihara fail a cliffhanger at this point is pretty shocking, considering the only time he's ever done so is the original appearance of the crazy cliffhanger. And considering his known perpetuity for doing well on cliffhangers, again it was still a bit shocking to see him fail here. But at this point we're down to the 3 finalists from the previous tournament, Tada, Yoshiyuki, and Morimoto, to where Tada, as expected, gets mid-cut, as again they're never going to show a full run of his, and he ends up clearing the cliffhanger only for him to fail the first vertical limit transfer, which was not particularly surprising from him, though the run I was surprised by was seeing Yoshiyuki, where again 100% I was expecting him to at least make vertical limit but probably end up failing there, and instead he ends up going back to failing the cliffhanger, which he's obviously failed in the past, but again, I thought we were past this with how well he did it in the last tournament. Even then, even 2 tournaments ago, he failed the cliffhanger, but cleared a second transition. This time, he just has terrible timing on his jump here, to where straight up, I do feel like this one was probably more so his fault of him just not being ready in time, as he really ends up jumping as the cliff is moving backwards, which was terrible timing for him, though following this, again, instead of getting an interview of Yoshiyuki, we instead get a lot of focus on an interview view of Yamada, which is Yokiyuki standing on the side, which was weird. And obviously with Yamada, it's like he gets very emotional. I'm assuming talking about his mother's passing and everything, and obviously feel for him there. But it once again just feels like Yamada's taking the spotlight away from his competitors, which has always felt very strange to me. But anyway, we then finally get to the final run of the tournament, where you have Morimoto here with less than 20 minutes of the episode and multiple commercial breaks mid-run, where very clearly he was not going to clear here. But again, has a extremely smooth run to the vertical limit, as you would expect, only from the fail the final transition, ending the tournament at the vertical limit, which again, I think this is fine. Again, I do like the vertical limit burst. I do think for its first appearance, for it to be this dangerous on the course, I think is a pretty solid conclusion to it. And again, I think it's cool that we didn't just get Morimoto being outright in first here. Again, we got a tie between him and Kitaro and Miyaoka. Like, I thought this was a decent enough conclusion to the tournament. A tournament that as a whole, like, I do feel like was solid. Again, I don't think this was a bad tournament under any light, but I do think it probably just lacks these like bigger moments that something like Sasuke 40 had plenty of. I feel like outside of like Nagano's sun clearing stage 1 and a couple of the fails in stage 1 that were pretty shocking, I do feel like very little of this tournament is going to really stick out over time. Though again, I think this tournament definitely has some major highlights to it, particularly the fact that again, we got a decent amount of new competitors here doing particularly well in the course. Again, I think the appearance of Miyaoka and Yamashita were really refreshing here. Again, seeing the likes of Kaio and Nakashima do well despite how young they are was very refreshing. Again, seeing a new celebrity do well here in Wasabi was refreshing. Again, seeing a couple new obstacles here, which again, like saying 2 new obstacles are on the course, again, that shouldn't be something I'm really praising Inui for, but sadly I have to. Again, at least that's something here as well. Again, I think as a whole, this was a pretty solid, consistent tournament, one that I think was mostly edited well. Again, I think we got to see a lot of runs here with there not being many egregious cuts in my mind, to where, again, I think this is a pretty solid tournament. Again, I think at the end of the day, if I were to redo my Sasuke tournament ranking, if I were to guess, I would say it's right in the middle. To where again, there were definitely some major highlights to the tournament, but I think as a whole, it just kind of comes off as one that's just kind of fine. Though again, I'm fully expecting a lot of the changes on this tournament to pay dividends in the following tournament, where we'll probably have people finally clear vertical limit burst and maybe have the reappearance of some of these newcomers and really able to build the legacy of this tournament over time. Though I think as of right now, again, I'm kind of just coming out of this feeling like it was good. But there we go. I mean, those are my thoughts on Sasuke 41. I'm moving forward. Obviously, I'll be back with Sasuke 42 in a year from now, so stay tuned for that. Beyond that, I'm still catching up on all the videos that I wanted to make from the end of last year, so expect those coming up pretty soon. Straight from a Sasuke or Ninja Warrior perspective, don't know how much I'm really going to do this year. I do have a Kunoichi tournament ranking that I made a while back that hasn't come out yet. Yeah, that'll be out eventually. Don't know when. Beyond that, obviously, I'll probably be back for A&W as well, so I guess there'll be that. But again, really don't know how much content I'll really be making from a Sasuke perspective, though. In an ideal world, I would have time to really make some, but again, more than likely I won't. But again, we'll see. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Sasuke 41. Thank you for watching.